Welcome to the second part of my Bande Dessinée overview, second out of 4. Today we're going to talk about Lucky Luke. And Lucky Luke was smoking until the 80s. So yes, they changed this cover. Originally, that was not grass, that was a cigarette in his mouth. But welcome to the second episode of my Bande Dessinée overview with my specific overlay of regions I lived in. Last week we discussed Asterix and the Great Divide, referencing the Berlin Wall. Today we're going to talk about the Wagon Train, Lucky Luke on his way to California. And you would think a Western comic, because Lucky Luke is a Western, French Western, you would find more references to California. But in fact, that's pretty much the only one that references California and that I want to dive deeper into. Even though I'm in the Bay Area, this book is not in the Bay Area, but we have this loose connection of the wagon train heading to California. Lucky Luke was created by the Belgian cartoonist Maurice in 1946. So Maurice wrote and drew the series until 1955, after which he started collaborating with René Goscinny, one of the creators of Asterix, and then their partnership lasted until Goscinny's death in 1977. Afterwards, Maurice used different writers until his own death in 2001. So this book is set on the California Trail heading west. It's about a guy called Mr. Boston leading the wagon train to California. But first of all, we again get the premise. The wagon train, an irresistible force, drew people from the eastern United States towards newly conquered lands in the west. Some of them went to find gold. Others sought freedom in the wide open spaces. Many, though, thought that the further west the prairie, the greener the grass, to make the long and dangerous crossing over a country that was still wild, the pioneers joined together and formed caravans of covered wagons. One of these covered wagon trains arrived in a little town of Nothing Gulch, sending the townsfolk into a frenzy. And that's basically where we meet Lucky Luke and Mr. Boston hiring him to lead the caravan west after they lost their recent guide. So shortly after heading west, leaving Nothing Gulch, they realize that the caravan keeps being sabotaged. And it becomes a whodunit story. Who's the saboteur? So they stop in Crazy City. They have to cross rivers and pass through Sioux territory. And at this point, it's worth noting that the depiction of Native Americans in this represents the view from 1964, which is when the story was written, and is very outdated by today's standards. But Maurice makes fun of everyone in here, except Lucky Luke, as always, not only the Native Americans. So I'm not going to spoil this story, as always. I want to keep it spoiler-free. But it's a fun story about the pioneers traveling west in wagons with great jokes along the way. Whether they ever make it to California, you'll find out when you read the story yourself. But it's a whodunit story along the way with classic Lucky Luke art and a traditional slapstick those comics were known for. Lucky Luke is probably at this point the title out of those 4 I picked with the most issues. I think we're up to like 80 something, 82, 83, and still new ones being published. The newer ones are hit and miss. There are some ones that definitely cross a line, some that are very educational, and you kind of have to pick what you like and see for yourself. But definitely one of the books that I grew up with and that I love, Lucky Luke, Maurice contributing to the big boom of Bande Dessinée comics in the 60s. And the term Bande Dessinée basically becoming popular in the 60s as all those titles kind of took off. If you want, you have French comics already in 1835 being first created, and then obviously Hergé in 1929 with Tintin starting things, and then Lucky Luke being created in 1946. Definitely a huge contributor to the success of Bande Dessinée. So other than the destination of California, there's little overlap with my life here in California that I could speak about. Other than, yeah, it's dry. And except for this winter, which surprisingly saw a lot of rain, for the most part of the last decade, we've been in a drought. So that definitely checks out with the scenery being desert-like. But that was it for this month. Lucky Luke and the Wagon Train. Again, not the greatest Lucky Luke story. Right there in the middle. It's not that offensive as other titles or other episodes of Lucky Luke can be. It's not that educational, other than there's a train wagon heading west. And that part, I think, is known by most. So unlike others where you actually get real characters in the story, Lucky Luke does that a lot, integrating real life characters into their stories. That doesn't happen here, but definitely a fun story to read. So I will see you all next month when we finally talk about Tintin and Flight 714 to Sydney. Thanks for watching. And if you hear the birds chirping in the background, they have me surrounded. There's one sitting right there, one sitting right there, and then a few stalking out over there. So excuse the chirping, but I might have to run soon.